everybody, it's Dan, and welcome back to Men Need to Be Heard. Hope you're having a fantastic week. I have a show for you today, one I've been looking forward to. This is a friend of mine. We've become friends over the internet, and he was kind enough to send me a copy of his book, and it was one of those books you just can't put down. It was really good reading, very informative, and we were talking. I said, I got to have you on the show, my friend, so that we could talk about the things you cover in the book and talk about things that men need to be aware of, because we're going to help you to potentially protect yourself from a lot of potential trouble down the road. So the book, just to kind of hold it up, is called Modern Women, a tutorial for men. And by the way, there'll be links down in the show notes so that you can go purchase it. But let me bring the author on. He is a gangster. No, I'm only kidding. His name is Sam Wright. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Dan.
So, yeah, we're just kidding around. Sam has to, for certain reasons, wear sunglasses. Besides the fact he looks better than me, so good on you. Sam, so how are you, my friend?
Doing well, doing well.
Doing
And
well.
you?
Good to hear. So, before we get into anything, I like to let people know who you are, a little bit about yourself. So, why don't you share with the audience anything you wish and let them know who you are?
Sure. I am a licensed private investigator and private investigation agency owner since 1991. And I have some additional private investigation experience prior to that. I'm also a retired law enforcement officer with about 25 years under my belt with municipal, county, and state agencies. Uh, and just in the interest of full disclosure, so that anybody reading knows, Sam Wright, the title on the book, that is a pen name
Right.
that I use. And I do have a licenses under my own name that can be verified if anybody has any doubts.
Well,
But
I can verify because you were kind enough to send them to me. He's the real deal, guys. So no
yeah,
worries there.
I and the way that I came up with the name was in discussing it with a friend of mine when I was writing the book. I said I want to use a pen name, and Sam W. Wright is an homage to Sam Kennison, if you remember Sam
Sam
Kennison.
Kennison, one of the best comics ever,
There is a
left this
brief,
world way too soon.
you may know the clip I'm talking about.
Uh,
There's a brief clip on YouTube of him at a club where he starts it off by saying, trying to get people not to get married. Anybody here been
I
married?
know the one you're
And,
talking about.
okay.
Oh yeah, I know that.
And when I saw that, the W in Sam W. Wright is for was.
I love it.
Uh,
I was
yeah.
see. I was thinking, because you are a PI, that you were playing off something like Sam Spade. That's actually what I thought. So we're old enough because we're OGs, old
Right.
guys. We're old enough to know what that means. The younger audience went, "Who's that?" But yeah, that's an amazing thing. Guys, if you've never seen Sam Kinison, unfortunately he's long past now, but probably the best comic in the '80s. He was in, what was the movie with Rodney Dangerfield?
No,
Uh,
back to school.
Back to School. Not as good as Caddyshack, but right below it. And he has a scene in that, which
The
later on I
school
found out
teacher.
they basically just riffed that. Yeah, there was a script, but they kind of went off of it.
Right.
Um, Go check it out, guys. We're digressing, but it's too good not to mention because it's fantastic. So, Sam, getting into the book a little bit. So, modern women. That's a phrase that I use also,
Hmm.
and I use it to kind of differentiate women from today's modern feminist style women, the ones that are kind of out there a little bit. That's my
Right.
my way of doing it, because there are differences in women. There really are.
Sure.
But I
Yes.
wanted to ask you. One of the first things I wanted to ask you is, what's your definition within the theme of the book of what a modern woman is?
It's partially it's very similar to yours, but it goes a little bit wider. Uh, the modern women to me is any woman born after 1900.
Okay.
It's only in varying degrees.
So
And I'll
basically
think,
in our age group. I'm kidding.
yeah, well, and the reason I say that, and we'll get into it a little later
Yep.
as we're talking about it, but uh, and let me preface it by saying the book is inflammatory to some people, to a lot of women. And as I put in the beginning of it, women who might read it would call me a misogynist. And I say, for the record, I do not hate women. I don't hate cobras either. But I know what a cobra is, and I know what the likely outcome will be if a man brings one into his home, his business, or his bed. Now, having said that, look, women today, some of them are very, very nice. They provide an enormous amount of valuable services to the world in general. Unfortunately, bringing peace and contentment into an individual man's life are not among those services. Sad, but that's the truth. Now, of course, there are exceptions. And I've actually talked to, I've discussed this with several women who they don't agree with everything I say, but they agree with many of my observations. It's and it's sad. It's unfortunate for them because, like many of us men, they are getting kind of the overblast from the things that their sisters have done.
Hmm.
It's like women have this huge propensity these days to pigeonhole all men, men this, men that, and this, without acknowledging the fact that there's the majority of men don't fall into the category that they're trying to put them in.
Right.
And as it's and I, this isn't a new concept to me. I've heard many many guys on many of the channels say this. The men that women describe that they disdain so much are the men that they want but can't have. The good men, the nice guys out there who would love them, adore them, take care of them, aren't even on the radar screen
Right.
for those women.
Right.
They're not interested. They don't see them. They're invisible to them. So, ladies, you got what you asked for.
Yeah, that's a classic case of be careful what you wish for, right? Because
Yeah.
I've made entire channels based on exactly what you just said, right? It's not all, I use the phrase occasionally, it's all women till it's no women, simply to point out that women say all the time it's all men till it's no men. Well, if it's fair
Yeah.
for them to say that in the terms of equality, it's fair for us to say it's all women till it's no women. I don't
And
actually
all
believe that though.
no. And on that note, one of you asked one of the questions you asked me was the inspiration.
Yeah, I was going to be my next
The
question.
the there were a number of things. One is the the false narrative that has been promoted ever since I was a little boy, and before that, I'm sure, of men, older men, adult men who have a responsibility to mentor younger men
Hmm.
who didn't mentor them with the truth. They propagated a lie. They painted this portrait of women generally as being chaste, virtuous, kind, considerate. And if you're told that from the time you're a young man, you naturally believe it. I mean, why would anyone lie to you about
Yeah,
it?
why would you believe anything else?
Yeah. So, and then you start growing up and you get into the real world and you start looking at the realities, objectively looking at what you're seeing and comparing it to the narrative that you were taught. And you're saying, wait a minute, there's a serious cognitive dissonance here. Uh, and then there's the the famous ubiquitous double standard
Hmm.
and the inconsistencies in terms of performance and expectations. And I saw this in the You see it in the criminal justice system. You see it in the civil court system, the divorce court system, family court system. Uh, Again, my background being primarily in law enforcement before I was an private investigator. There was an overlapping period where I maintained both jobs, both licenses and law enforcement jobs. So you've got this situation where I'm going in and out of court on cases, and I'm seeing women charged with criminal offenses being found guilty, convicted, and the sentences are handed down, and I'm scratching my head saying, wait a minute, that's not consistent with the last one of these cases of a man
Mm.
that was involved in this kind of behavior. Uh, Another thing I saw a lot of as as a police officer, in addition to being a police officer and a detective, police detective, I was also an adjunct instructor at a regional law enforcement academy for probably, I guess, about let's say, about 15 or 16 years. An adjunct being I didn't teach constantly, but I would come into each class and I would be assigned different sections to teach. And when I started doing that originally, it was back in around 1996. By the time 2014 rolled around, that was when I stopped. I just said, I can't do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The first class that I taught was almost, I think it was a corrections class, and it was, I think, 100% men. There may have only been a couple of females in it, and the class was about 35 people. The last class that I taught was a law enforcement class. It was, it had, it had about 21 people in it, seven of which were females. And as a police officer working the road and in the law enforcement academy and teaching, look, men and women are biologically different, not just psychologically different. This is kind of it's a stupid thing to have to say, as if it wasn't obvious. But you put women in police uniforms or in academy classes, and you subject them to the harsh, the harsh physical conditions that they're going to meet on the street, and they get hurt.
Yeah.
And not only do they get hurt, the men who have to work with them get hurt also, because it's a man's natural instinct to be protective. So they they're physically weaker. Uh, and during the academy classes, we would do the defensive tactics section, and we would end up having to pair the females in the class with other females, because if we paired them with the males, we had to watch them like a hawk to make sure that the men didn't hurt them. Um, well, it's not fair. It's not fair to the community. It's not fair to the public. It's not fair to the other officers, and it's not fair to the women, because we're having to treat them using a different standard.
You know, it's interesting, Sam, because as you're relaying that, I was thinking, for those that don't know, or perhaps you don't know, is I am a personal trainer, but I've also taught self-defense, right? So I had a woman in one of my personal training classes who was a deputy sheriff. And oh, by the way, had martial arts training. And we were having this exact discussion because she was a training officer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, she happened to have a new, what do they call them? Candidate? I think that was the term she used.
Recruit,
No, they were out of the academy. They're first going in.
training.
Train. She used some other term, but anyway, it's immaterial. And she was talking. You know, it was a younger girl, a tiny thing, like 5'1", 100 pounds soaking wet. And the woman that I was training, you know, her training officer, ballpark 5'8", probably 210 to 220, and ripped.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about it, and we were joking around. I'm like, if she ever had to go against me, because I'm 6'1" and 280 and know what the hell I'm doing, right? She would be erased. And other women in the class would go, that's not fair, blah, blah, blah. So this woman, because I don't want to out her name, said, let me show you something. So she said, I'm going to try and arrest Dan. And she said to me, here's what I'm going to, kind of told me what we're going to, but I already knew it, right?
Mm.
So she tried to take me down. She tried, she couldn't do it, right? And I
Mhm.
literally put my arms around her. And if I had wanted to, I could have slammed her, right? And she said to the other women, this is the reality out there, right? I mean, I'm a bigger guy than most, true, but this is what they would face with a guy that's 5'9" and 200 pounds, right? And
Mhm.
the other women were like, "But you're trained. Training works to a point, and I think you would agree with me on that.
Sure.
But size, muscular, and skeletal differences, they matter." And
Training does not nullify biology.
exactly, and people don't understand that. There's this whole debate about the women in sports, which I have talked about many times. It's not fair. If you put
Mm.
a man who was raised, or for that matter, even if you started giving him, the replacement hormones at 10 or 11 years old, and I don't want to get into the whole political side of it, I'm talking biologically. If
Mhm.
even a 10-year-old boy has had 10 years plus womb time to develop a thicker bone structure, more muscle mass, that's not going to go away. No amount of hormones you inject is going to make that go away. So it is biologically unfair. Has nothing to do
Mhm.
with your political beliefs.
Right,
And
exactly.
and that's your point you're trying to make with this is that, and it goes to what you were saying earlier. We're not trying to put women down in any way. We're just simply acknowledging reality.
Yeah. There's another one of the other things that kind of inspired me to write the book is working with men as a coworker and also as a private investigator, uh, having men. It's very difficult to sit at a table in a diner meeting with a client and watching the tears well up in his eyes as he's describing his discovery that one of his three children isn't his
Mm,
after being married for more than 40 years.
mm.
One of a 30-year-old child of his actually isn't his. Uh, and that's not the only one case like that. I've had a number of cases of having, and I think people don't realize this, more, maybe a long time ago, the problem was more with men stepping out.
Hmm.
That went away several decades ago. There there are more women engaging in infidelity than men, and there are several reasons for that. I think one of the important reasons is it's easier for them. All a woman has to do is send a equivocal signal to a man that she's available.
Hmm.
If the man responds, all she has to do is follow his lead. And if he doesn't respond, she can just ignore it, write it off. And if she gets confronted about it, she can pull the plausible deniability card and flip the script. Oh, he's a pig. He's got a dirty mind. I was just being sociable or friendly. And in
Yeah,
today's
that's the one
atmosphere,
I hear all the time. I was just trying to be friends.
mm,
And, he misinterpreted it. And I mean,
yeah,
to your point, I think I've always argued, going back 40 years, it's pretty much equal, right? Men cheat, women cheat, whatever the overall percentages are. In the end, basically, it's men cheating with women, women cheating with men. So,
right.
in essence, it's going to be roughly equal. I always have granted is women are way better at hiding it, like miles ahead of men. Men are idiots when it comes to that. I'm sorry to say, right? They get
There's
caught all the time. Women do not.
there's there's a show because again, it's been kind of a serious study of mine, this particular subject matter. You're familiar with the show Cheaters?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's interesting. If you watch those shows, when men get caught cheating and confronted, they look like the proverbial deer in the
Headlights,
headlights.
yes.
Uh, I got nothing, or they run. When the women are confronted, most of the time, their reaction is, I didn't do anything. That's not me. No, nothing happened. He's just a friend. And then they show them the video
Yeah, where
of,
they have them dead to rights.
right, show them the video. And what's their go-to? It's your fault. You neglected me. You weren't there
Yep.
for me. You were neglecting my emotional needs. And so once again, it goes back to it's the bad men or the bad guy. And one of the other things is, and this goes back to doing my law enforcement days as a detective and as a first responder police officer. I don't know how many suicides I worked.
Mm.
Most of them were men. Uh, the the method of choice, well, I should have said self deletions.
So yeah,
Sorry.
well, once is good. We're good. You're good.
Okay. Uh, Most of the self deletions of men were perpetrated with a firearm.
Hmm.
If not all of them, I think pretty much all of them were.
It's by far the
Uh,
number one method.
yeah. And when you investigate what brought this on, I would say probably 70 to 80% of them were the discovering of a cheating
Hmm.
spouse or cheating girlfriend, or depression, despondent over the ending of a marriage, and things like that. These men became morose, depressed,
Yep.
and so that was what generated that. And another thing, uh, I have, I don't know, friends and associates, guys I worked with in law enforcement. How many of the guys that I worked with who ended up divorced and taken to the cleaner? Uh, and before I go any further, let me tell you, I do not defend bad behavior by anybody.
Hmm.
If, infidelity by anyone, men, women, to me, it doesn't matter. You either behave like an honorable human being or you behave like a pig. Your choice. You've got to decide what you want to do. I have found that men have a more deeply seated sense of personal honor. Uh, they don't want to be looked down upon by their peers as being unfaithful or untrustworthy. And I notice men, I will call out a
Hmm.
man. I have a very small circle of friends. I won't approve or give an attaboy or a pat on the back to a man who's cheating. I won't do it. Women, interestingly enough, have a different response to their girlfriends who are unfaithful. Oh, I understand, honey. You deserve better.
Yep.
It's not your fault. Uh, he should be treating you better than that.
He's
This is
neglected. The famous one right now that they're using is your needs were neglected. He neglected your needs, so it's his fault. I
yeah.
mean, to your point, I did a video on this 8 months ago somewhere, and they're talking about exactly that, right?
Mhm.
Is that because a woman had put out on Instagram, TikTok, one of them, the question: what do men hold other men accountable when they have affairs? And I said it's not universal one way or the other, but the overwhelming majority of men will call a guy out for doing it. Women have
Yeah.
this perception that we're all going attaboy, fist bumping, and all that.
Mhm.
It's the exact
No.
opposite. But to your point, also, women, on the other hand, will find every reason they can to justify their friend or coworker or whatever for stepping out. And
And they'll run interference
and
for
they'll
it.
I was trying to think of how to phrase it. They'll help her do it if they need to.
Mhm.
Oh, I'll cover for you. I can't tell you the number of women who've admitted to me behind the scenes that, oh yeah, I was cheating and my girlfriend helped me out. She would say we were, I'm going to hang out with, Jane. I'm just picking a random name. So I'll be out all night when in fact she was stepping out. And if the husband ever tried to call Jane, Jane would reply, oh yeah, she's here somewhere and cover for her. And that was women admitting it to me, not men.
Yeah.
And I was like, but yet, if you ask women that, they'll deny it till the cows come home. It's,
Well, fortunately, being in the professions that I have been in, they can't get away with that with me because I have too many resources that I won't discuss here to actually be privy to their private conversations.
well, it's funny, Sam. I haven't told you about this, but I want to share it with you as a private investigator because, and in the audience. My first divorce, my first wife was having an affair.
Mhm.
And I have said to many guys, go get a PI, which I did. It was the most, it was expensive. It probably cost me about 2 grand at the time. Mind you, this is the 90s. I don't know what it costs now. It was the best 2 grand I ever spent in my life because he got film of her and her now husband, by the way, boyfriend, going to a certain hotel. He got a lot, okay? We're in New York at the time. This was in New York State. That was still a fault divorce state. It was not.
Right.
You had to have a reason to get divorced. They didn't change that till I believe 2010, right? There was no such thing as no fault. So we're in the courtroom. You're going to love this. And she's denying it all, blaming me. I'm horrible, irreconcilable differences. And I had a shark for an attorney. So, so she pulls out, we're on this. And the judge doesn't know what's going on, right? It's he said, she said to the judge, right? So my attorney just takes out this VCR tape and sets it on the table. And her attorney looks over and goes, "What's that?" She goes, "Don't worry about it. Continue on," right? And the judge is looking at it, right? And now her attorney's freaking out. What is this tape? And it's just sitting there. Not a word has been said. So, long story short, they eventually asked for 10-minute recess so the two attorneys could confer. And my attorney and her attorney go into usually you each go to your conference room and then the attorneys meet
Right.
out in the hall. And I overheard most of the conversation. He's like, "What's that tape about?" "Well, we're going to prove your client's been committing adultery on the list of dates and time." I mean, you know how it is. You do the reports, dates, times, everything, right? "She's told me she's never had an affair. Blah, blah, blah." The whole thing, right? And to be fair to her attorney, the guy was clueless. It's not his fault, right? Long story short, I won everything in that divorce, right? It was
Oh,
filed under her fault, not mine.
mhm.
Didn't help with child support or any of that. But as I said, that was the best 2 grand I ever spent because she didn't get a dime of alimony after that.
Yeah.
And
Good.
that's why I'm like, someone like you, I tell guys all the time, talk to a PI. Well, talk to your attorney first, but talk to a PI and potentially hire one because if she is stepping out, you need to protect yourself.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, for people who think that one of the things I say in the book, I did not write it because I wanted to get rich or just I want to sell books. I wrote it because I truly want to help men to prevent a lot of unnecessary suffering by bringing things to them that they have not been told about. And the what I was going to mention is I have both men and women clients, and if you talk to the female clients I've had, they would give me a glowing review. He really did well for me. He got solved the case and really helped me out. Not only that, but I was kind of strapped for cash. He gave me a discounted rate, which I will do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to do this. I'm not hurting for money. So if someone is strapped and they need the service, I don't mind giving them a little break. I mean, I've actually done some pro bono work,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, I forgot where I was going with it. Talking about,
Well,
uh,
hiring a PI maybe or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've actually had people come to me and I've asked them about the case and they've told me, and I'll say, okay, do you have kids? Yes. Are they grown? Yes, they're grown. They're like, okay. The house. Do you own the house or are you still making mortgage payments? We own the house. Florida's a no fault state. You want me to get proof. I can't guarantee I can get proof for you. But having said that, even if I could, your satisfaction will be short-lived because it's not going to make a difference when you get to court.
Right.
So my recommendation is based on what you've told me, it's obvious that your spouse is being unfaithful. I can try I can try and get proof for you, or at least reasonable proof. And but if you're expecting me to get you a pornographic movie showing full penetration and things like that, not going to happen. But I might be able to get enough to satisfy it, but I don't know how long it'll take. If I can get it at all, it could get it in one night, or it could take weeks. So it could
Hmm.
run into a lot of money. So my recommendation is this: take the money that you would have spent on me and hire an attorney, because he's going to charge you more than I would.
Right.
Get an attorney, go ahead, file for divorce, and the money that you get from it, have a girls' night out, or take your brothers out for a beer or something.
Hmm.
Because in a no fault state, if you can't actually, it doesn't matter. You could show the proverbial pornographic movie, and
It'd be irrelevant because
it's not
there's no
going to
fault
make
to
a
be
difference.
found with it. But I mean, there are still time. I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this. 'Cause I want to talk on the book about the book, but these are very important points that you're bringing up. You know, when it like that was 30 years ago. New York is no longer a fault state. So what happened, while it's awesome and it's one of the highlights of my life, if I might add, it would be irrelevant these days. But where it is important might be in something of the cases of they're trying to hide money and you can't get a forensic evaluator or something like that, or they are like I've seen cases, and because I work with guys that are going through family court where they've had private investigators be able to prove that the mother was abusing the child by following her around, seeing her behavior. One case that was in a playground, she basically knocked the kid out at the playground, and they got it on film, and the guy ended up getting custody. This was a couple of years ago, right? Those are instances where you want to do it. It's again, guys are so far behind the eight ball in family court. You have to prove you're a good dad first of all. But if you have instances where we're separated, but something ain't right, it might be worth it. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah. The, One of the other things that's when you asked about the inspiration, this is, you may remember this. Men men want men want to enjoy each other's company without the pressure of feeling like they're walking on eggshells. And that's why decades ago they had men's clubs where men could go and sit around, play cards, and do things like that. Women didn't like that, so they sued.
Yep.
You're discriminating. They sued. So men no longer have the freedom of association. You can't have a club that discriminates based on gender. Uh, so this invasion of men's social space, and also the invasion of the professional arenas, as well as I mentioned, law enforcement
Mm-hmm.
and other venues that were traditionally spaces that men inhabited. And the question going, well, why do they do that? Because they don't want men to have the liberty of the freedom of association. We want to be, it's all about control, as I mentioned in part of the book.
Yeah.
We want to control what you do.
Yep.
And uh, that's been like that for a while. Let's see, I have
Well,
noticed.
it's interesting because like I've talked about it recently when it comes to the gym. One of the places that men like to go to de-stress, potentially bond with other men, whatever, is the gym. And even in co, I own gyms. Okay, they were co-ed gyms,
Mhm.
but you would see the guys would go off and because most women do cardio bunnies, we call them, right? They're on the treadmills or whatever. The men are over lifting, and there were
Mhm.
times there'd be three, four, five guys lifting together, and laughing and joking and all that. And the women started making their way into it. Now, to be fair, a lot of them were just genuinely interested in working out and didn't want to work out with other women, right?
Mm.
Because they didn't want to deal with other women either. That's the hilarious part about it, right? But there were some that were trying to weasel their way in. Basically, just like you said, they didn't like the fact that men were off having fun and they weren't included. I
Yeah.
actually had one say that to me because she was harassing the group of men, right? And I said to her, "Look, just leave them alone. They're not bothering you. They just want to do their yeah, but I want to be involved in it. It's not fair and all that." And I'm like, long story short, she ended up getting her membership terminated. But it speaks to what you're talking about is that it denies men that opportunity to step away, if you will, from whatever it is in their life that they need to step away from. It might be stress at work, whatever, their marriage. And it is a means of control.
Mm.
Absolutely, it is, without question. And yet, they don't see it that way. They see it as, well, if you don't include us, you're sexist.
Right.
It has nothing to do
And-
with sexism.
well, years ago, I thought, gee, well, how do you respond to that? You don't try to have a rational conversation with an irrational person.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than try and come up with an explanation, if they say you're a misogynist, yeah, okay, what's your point? Yeah, all right. So what? Sue
Yeah.
me. Uh, let me, because I'm kind of getting behind on what I'm thinking about here. One of the other things you asked, what, let's see, what message, the messages I might give to young men or men today.
Yeah, let's jump into that a little bit because that's important because within the book itself, you have a lot of messaging to men. One of the things I think I mentioned this to you that I loved about the book. I've read hundreds, probably thousands of books similar to this where it's trying to talk about a particular subject that affects men and women, right?
Hmm.
Everything from your book, Modern Women, to Men Are From Mars. Remember that one? The
Yeah.
whole gamut, right? One of the things I think that separates your book from most of them, and some would argue it's controversial the way you do it. I don't think so, but what I love about it is you tell it like it is. You talk to men in a manner of speaking that they understand, right? In a language that men understand. And I have no doubt it pisses women off because you're not using language that is what women understand. Men communicate differently than women. That's not to say
Yeah.
it's better. We all, women use 1,000 words where men will use 10. That's my standard thing. And I love the fact, as I was reading the book, I was like, this is written in a way that the average guy can read it, take so much out of it to understand how to protect himself for the most part, but make his relationship better and all that. And like I said, I have no doubt that more than anything probably is what pisses women off because
And
you're
it's, and
also
it's,
giving away the secrets.
yeah, well, it's unfortunate because, and the women aren't around when I said this, but I have said to men in small groups and also individually that I've talked to, I've said, look, women are not the enemy. If you want to see the enemy, go look in a mirror. That is your worst enemy. And it's your worst enemy because, and you don't realize it, because of the indoctrination that you've undergone for decades. Uh, you cannot change or fix what you perceive to be the flaws in women. You can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
They're wired differently. You're not going to do it. So what you need to do is focus on developing the mechanisms of self-control, self-restraint, and self-improvement that are actually available to you because you're not going to change them. You're not going to fix them. And of course, there's the old adage that all men are familiar with, and I've used a lot with guys. Guys, think with the big head, not the little one.
Guys hate when you say that, but the reality is it happens all too many times, right?
It's true. And you put, look, guys, put your own physical, mental, and spiritual health and that of your brothers, put that first.
Mm-hmm.
you can't help anyone else if you're broken. And if you allow the frustrations and stress of relationships with women break you physically, emotionally, psychologically, and financially, you're useless to anyone who actually might need you. So stop trying to, don't help, don't white knight. Uh, and again, it's hard to overcome because men have this natural instinct to protect women.
which
Some
which
women
is
get offended.
then yeah, which is then a lot of them grow up in single mothers households, so that their mother makes them the man of the house.
Hmm.
Which I one of the worst things I've said to, because I've had many single mothers say to me, what is the best thing I can do for my son? And I say it by saying, I'll tell you what's the worst thing you can do, which is tell him he's the man of the house at any age.
Right.
And I've had women say to me, oh, I said that to my 5 year old. And I'm like, you have no idea what you're doing to that boy if you do that, right? Because we are naturally ingrained to be the protector, the provider, and all that. It's biological that we're made
Hmm.
that way.
Yeah.
And when you reinforce it, then the boy in that case, but as they become men, are unable to differentiate themselves and their needs, their wants, their emotions, their desires from that caricature, if you will. And it's
Hmm.
one of the things you're talking about in the book is, and you kind of just talk about it now, is men have to put themselves first, I guess is the way I'll put it, right? And say, I can't be the best provider, the best friend, the best lover, the best man, period, if I don't put myself first.
And part of that, putting yourself first, part of that process is you've got you have got to control the narrative, so to speak. When women become accustomed to being able to rely on you and do what they want to do and know that you will be there to clean up after them, uh, it kind of gives them carte blanche. I can do whatever I want,
Mm-hmm.
and he'll help me, he'll rescue me. And I don't know how familiar you are, what your particular religious beliefs are, but or if you have any, but in Proverbs 1, it it's wisdom is talking. Wisdom says, listen, come, listen to me. I've got this for you. I'm here to help you. I have all of this wisdom for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then it changes because no man regarded, because not man, but man generally, no one regarded. They just rejected my counsel.
Hey fans, I just wanted to take a quick break from the show to remind you just how much we here at Men Need to Be Heard truly appreciate and value your support. And we'd like to ask you to do us a little favor. It won't cost you a dime, and it'll only take a few seconds out of your day. Could you take a moment to give us that like, give us that thumbs up on the video, and even share it with your friends? Doing so will help us to spread the word and continue to raise awareness on the issues that men and boys face in today's modern world. And we'd love to hear what you have to say on today's topic. So don't forget to comment down below and let us know how we're doing. Your input and feedback means the world to us, and it helps us to continue bringing great guests and even more content each and every week. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss an episode. It's the best way to stay up to date with all of our latest discussions, interviews, and deep dives into the issues men and boys face. It also helps the channel to grow so that we can continue to raise even more awareness on the issues. So hit that subscribe button and become part of the Men Need to Be Heard community. All right, that's it for now. Back to the show.
When their calamity comes, I will laugh. They will come to me, and I won't answer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the idea of you have to force people to be accountable if you're dealing. And this is another thing that I know it really makes women mad, but most women are today, modern women,
Mm-hmm.
they are toddlers in adult bodies. I think of my grandmother who was born in the late 1800s. Woman who worked my grandfather was a World War One veteran, had got tuberculosis in the trenches of France, so
Wow.
he was disabled. And she worked like a horse and took care of him and was devoted to him. They were married for probably 65 years. You don't see that today. There were I remember hearing a talk given by a Marine lieutenant who was wounded in Vietnam, lost an eye, lost an arm, part of an arm. He described being in the hospital bed recovering, and his wife was there with him constantly by his bed, except sometimes she'd have to leave. But he said he remembers laying there and seeing young women come in, look at these wounded soldiers, young men,
Hmm.
see their wives come in, stand at the bedside, look down at them, and sadly shake their heads and say, I didn't sign up for this, and take their wedding rings off and drop it on them and walk out the
I've
door.
heard those stories before, and I always wondered are they true, but apparently they
And
are. Yeah.
this was from the horse's mouth who actually witnessed it.
Yeah.
So uh, it's a different world. And one of the other things I'm trying to help men, I say don't white knight for them. And also, it's very, very important. Pay attention to what women say versus what they do. Watch for the inconsistencies and contradictions. Modesty, vulgarity in speech, appearance, and behavior. If a woman, if you're a man, do you want a virtuous woman or one who is not virtuous? Most men, I think, would say, well, if you're talking about a long-term relationship or marriage, I want a virtuous woman.
Hmm.
You're going to have to watch her for an extended period of time to determine whether she is, and you're going to have to see her under stress. It's very easy to fake it when things are going well. When she doesn't get her way, you can understand someone who doesn't get their way. They're going to be a little bit annoyed, perhaps, or upset.
Hmm.
But does she accept it like an adult? Do you remember there was a video? Uh, you probably saw it of a guy. He's in his truck with his wife, and she wants to go to the lake. You know the video I'm talking about?
No, not
And
yet, but
she
keep talking about it.
she has an absolute, this is an adult woman, an absolute uh, infantile meltdown where she's screaming, kicking the dashboard with her feet. I want to go to the lake. Can you never take me to the lake? And I guess she didn't realize that had his phone
He
out,
was
was
filming.
recording this.
Yeah.
Uh, if you're talking about you want to find a good woman, watch her behavior. Is she modest? Why? Look, I understand men are visual. We're attracted to attractive women.
Yep.
Do you want to shackle yourself to life to a woman who who hooked you by exposing more flesh and more giving you more attention than a virtuous woman would?
Well, I mean that's an interesting point you're making there, Sam. Because one of the I don't know if it's the biggest thing I hear from men that are having troubles with the relationships, but it's right up there. Is what you're talking about, right? Is she's not who she was when I met her. And a lot of times I've made the argument back to them after having conversations, she's exactly who she was when you met her.
You're right.
You are
Absolutely.
blind to it, my friend, right? And I'm not trying to be mean to them, but like I'm kind of relating this to real life scenarios that I've dealt with. Not too long ago, I was coaching a guy and he's like, I don't understand it. Because he thinks she's stepping out. She's having an affair. She's dressing like this and blah, blah, blah. And I've never seen that before. And I said, okay. And I believed him. It's not that I didn't think or thought he was lying. We're having our conversation. We're going to, and I kind of circle back. So, when you met her, how did it go? Right. And he starts describing their first date. And I said, oh, okay, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, where'd you go? What, da, da. We're having a conversation. Oh, she was dressed in this skimpy little outfit. Her boobs were hanging out, all this stuff. And I'm sitting here like this going, okay. And I slept with her that night, blah, blah, blah. He thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I'm like, okay, if that works for you, that's fine. But my friend, you just told me you're concerned that she's doing that very same behavior right now. And you said she wasn't like that before. And he just looked at me with
Did
this.
the light come on?
It did, right? But he glazed over it first. He kind of went quiet and he's looking around. And then he looks at me and he goes, "You're right." And I'm like, it's not your fault. It is, but it isn't, right? You get the woman you're attracted to just like you're wearing sunglasses, right? Except there's no vision through them. I've been guilty of it, right? But we have to take responsibility for that. The issue that I see, and this is something I wanted to address with you, is once men get into relationships like that, how do they protect themselves? Let's call it emotionally, physically, right? Because some cases it becomes physical abuse,
Hmm.
and they don't realize it. How do they protect themselves? Drawing from what you put in the book as a Leo, as a private investigator, emotionally, physically, mentally, financially, legally, all that stuff. What would be some? Because you talk about some of that in the book.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult to close the barn door after the horses have escaped. Uh, it's critical that men, and that's why I harp on this a lot in the book, talking about the social, cultural, and corporate forces that manipulate not just men, but women also manipulate people for the sake of money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think about it. I would challenge any man listening to do this. Sit in front of your TV with a stopwatch, a pad, and a pencil. Watch, whether it's on YouTube or any of the platforms, movies where you have advertisements. Watch the advertisements that come on, but pay particular attention to who's in the advertisement. The women are almost all attractive, fit, wearing clothes that I would call less than modest. They're pretty.
Mm-hmm.
That's their eye candy.
Yep.
That's get your attention. And as you're watching it, watch who they're interacting with. If there are men in the commercial, the man, I can almost guarantee you, the man is going to be portrayed as an idiot or as just a wimp.
Right.
But as you're watching, when the commercial starts, start the stopwatch or start timing it. And every time the image that you're looking at changes from one little image to another, make a little mark because you won't be able to keep track of it by writing down the actual number. Make the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the cross mark for the 5.
Mm-hmm.
Do that every time the scene changes. And you will find that you can watch a 15 or 30-second commercial and the image changes 20 to 30 times in a, let's say a 15-second spot. It can change actually up to 15 times.
Right. As quick as possible, they want to change it. Yeah.
Well, there's a reason for that because your mind can't process information that quickly,
Mm-hmm.
but your eye can see it. So it's going into your head. And the way this relates to men and imagery, most of these commercials and advertisements and movies have these attractive women in them. Well, that's there to make you go, duh. There's a quote I put in the book by Thomas Sowell. That's something I think he says, it's long been my experience that the sight of a good-looking woman can lower a man's IQ by at least 20 points. A man who
I know
doesn't
that quote. Yeah.
a man who doesn't have 20 points to spare can be in big trouble.
Yes. I know exactly
Well,
what. Yeah.
that's the goal. to get you don't think. And that's why I harp on developing. Look, being physically fit is very important, but men tend to neglect their mental and intellectual fitness.
Hmm.
You need to learn how to critically think and evaluate the images that are put in front of you and what you're being sold and told. Uh, Here's another thing, and this is part of my seminar: music. William Congreve from his the Morning Bride. The play was a playwright from 100 years or so ago, or a couple 100 years ago. You've probably heard the saying, music hath charms to suit, to
To
bend the
suit.
knotted,
Yep.
can
And
soothe the
sue the
savage
savage beast.
breast.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, well, I think that's true. Think back to the songs that that were famous songs that we remember. Uh, and I probably can't even read the lyrics without violating
Oh
somebody's
yeah, you got to
copy.
be careful with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I won't do it, but I'll name the songs and encourage people. You go back and listen to the lyrics. Uh, Pretty Woman. You listen to these lyrics, and what you see is this repetitive pattern of men whining and being sad.
Hmm.
You've lost that loving feeling.
That's a
Most
that's a good one to for that
most of
example.
these songs,
Yeah.
but if you think about it, and everybody remembers them and they know them. Well, you keep hearing this over and over again. And men have been conditioned that this is normal behavior to be emotionally overwrought. Men need to toughen up. I'm not saying don't have emotion. You're a human being. You're going to have emotion. There are going to be things that come along that depress you or upset you.
Hmm.
Get over it, guys. Just toughen up and turn that crap off. I tell not just men but women too. What do women like? They just love. What do they constantly watch? The Hallmark Channel. It appeals to their emotions. This romantic idealization of relationships that has nothing to do with objective reality. But they become conditioned that this is normal. No, it isn't. And the same thing happens with men.
Yep.
Culture has so badly damaged men and women for the sake of money. Let's cripple people, make them dependent. You know what the number one drug of choice is for women?
Ambien.
that,
Sorry, I didn't mean
that's all right. Well, the second, that's number two. The number one drug of choice for women, dopamine.
Yeah, no, you're right on that. It's
Anything that will give them
that
that
dopamine hit.
rush.
And you see it
Yeah,
on social media, right? That you're
yeah.
seeing it right now. There's trends going around. The 4B movement is going around, right? Let's cut our hair. It's ludicrous on its face. But what's happening is the women that have made those videos where they're shaving their head over a presidential election because somehow shaving your hair is going to change it. Okay. But really what they're seeking is exactly what you just talked about, Sam, is the dopamine hit because they're
Mhm.
getting literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of you go girls in the comments.
Yeah.
And every one of them is a dopamine hit to them.
Mhm.
And so it justifies them. And then other women see that, oh man, she shaved her head, so I'm going to become part of that group, even though it has nothing to do with me or no interest in it. But if I shave my head too and become part of the coven, as I like to call it, right? Then I'm going to get thousands of women going, "You go, girl," and that's going to feel good. And 2 days later, after all that happens, you're going to look in the mirror and go, "What the f did I just do?" And
Yeah.
it is happening to them. But it goes
Mhm.
to exactly what you're talking about. It's that dopamine hit. And social
And
media is making a killing on it.
sure. And not just social media, but the movie industry, the
Oh,
television
yeah,
industry,
absolutely.
the
Hollywood.
advertising industry. There's, and I think in large part, the government is perfectly happy with this. There's, there was a Roman poet and satirist by the name of Juvenal, lived in the first century AD. There's a phrase that he came up with, and I'll read the English quote from it, called panem et circenses, which translates bread and circuses. It's a Latin phrase. It refers to the government's attempt to distract uh, the public from real issues by providing them things that make life more enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
The phrase is attributed to Roman poet satirist Juvenal. It describes how the Roman Empire's rulers used free food and violent entertainment to keep people politically passive.
Mm-hmm.
The line reads, the people who once upon a time bestowed military commands, high civil offices, legions, and everything else, now restrains itself and instead eagerly hopes for just two things, bread and circuses. And that's what we have now. Uh, I can I can remember as, and I'm sure you remember this too. I remember the days before social media, before the internet, before computers.
I remember them. They were
As
great days, actually, compared to
yeah,
now.
it was.
They really were.
I can remember as a 11, 10 or 11-year-old boy clipping playing cards to my
To the
bicycle
bicycle spokes. Yep.
fender. Yeah,
Yep.
to make it sound like a little motorcycle.
Yep.
We built forts. We played baseball. Uh, Things like that. Uh, no interest. We didn't. We didn't even really pay any attention or know what girls were until we started to get around the age of puberty, 10 or 12 years old or so. And then we started to notice a little bit.
Yep.
Girls the same way. Like back then, girls had cooties. So
Yeah, it's the phrase I use myself. I was 12 years old the first time I noticed a girl, even though and it was in sixth grade, right?
Mhm.
I won't say her full name, but her name was Kelly. She sat right next to me because we were, they line you up in homeroom by your name so they can count easier.
Right.
She was the first girl I ever noticed. And we'd been in classes together, homerooms for 6 years at that point. But biology kicked in at that point, and I went, oh, and not that I got smitten with her or anything like that, but that's my first recollection of noticing it. Prior to
Mhm.
that, it was baseball, football, right? We were outside playing dusk to dawn. We never looked at a TV.
Yeah.
And our dopamine hit in that case was something like putting a card into the spokes of our bike, or
Yeah.
tearing apart a lawnmower and making a go-kart out of it. I did that. There's tons of stuff. I mean, I love these things that you're bringing up, and that's all gone now.
It is, and it's sad because men and women are both victims. I hate using the word victims, but it's appropriate in that case. The modern world and social media and things like that has done tremendous damage
Mm-hmm.
to people. Uh, Back to the bread and circuses, modern women have learned that they can control witless men by replacing panem et circenses with, and I don't think this will get you hit because I'm using the Latin. They're replacing panem et circenses with fellatio et coitus.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't take any effort, so there's no real relationship there. It's I know what men want. I know what their weakness is. I can get them to do my bidding for me by providing this for them, and not just them, but for any other man who I think I might be able to use to extract something from them.
Well, to your point on that, Sam, there's an entire, I won't use the name, but it starts with O and has an F in it, right? There's
Yeah.
an entire website out there that's exactly what you're talking about. And there are women making millions of dollars on that, which is a very, very tiny percentage, I might add. A
Yeah.
very tiny. The majority of women, I don't know what they're thinking, but they go on this, they do what you're talking about, they expose themselves and all that. They end up getting crushed in the end because they're seeking that dopamine hit and they don't
Mm.
get it. And then they lose their minds, right? As I've spoken to a couple of women now, they went that route and they got nobody interacted with them at all. And they were
Mhm.
putting full nudity up,
Yeah.
crushed them. And these were not like ugly girls, not by any stretch. I mean, I wouldn't call them, they weren't no Giselle Bunchins, but they were attractive.
Mhm.
And it speaks to what you're talking about with society and all that has manipulated girls into thinking this is a good thing, and it ends up just their self confidence is gone after that.
Think about, and this is yeah, one of the, let me jump off for a second. You asked me what the response has been since the book's release. It's been extraordinarily positive. And the most common comment that I get from men is, I wish I had this information before I got married.
Mm-hmm.
That is the most common expression. And back to talking about the OF stuff, it's it's laziness. And, well, I can make quick, easy money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, well, so can I. If I want to go out and become a criminal, and believe me, based on what I've learned over the years, if I wanted to do that, I could do it without being caught.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I would have to sacrifice is my dignity and self-respect. And there's no amount of money that's worth that. And another thing I tell young men, guys, look, if you if you even if you're not a even if you're not a Chad or a particularly good-looking guy, finding a woman who will give it up for you isn't a problem. All you have to be willing to give up in exchange is your dignity and self-respect as a man.
Yep.
And that's too high a price to pay. If And you pointed something out that's relevant to men and women, and something I've said many times. Everything you get in this life, you will pay for. You will either pay as you go, or you will make a balloon payment at the end,
Yep.
but you're going to pay. There's nothing free. So for example, all of you ladies on the OF sites and these other places, yeah, go for it. And 15 years, 20 years from now, when you're fat, sagging, worn out, alone, and nobody wants you because you've conditioned yourself to for this dopamine hit, the validation,
Mm-hmm.
what are you going to have besides a room full of cats and cabinets full of boxed wine?
That's my line, my
That,
friend. Cats, boxed wine, and Ambien. Well, it's yeah, it's interesting because along those lines, and again, I've had these conversations with younger women going, they're not thinking long term. You took at it from a relationship perspective, but I've even said look at it from an employment perspective, right? When I was 20, 25, 30, what I was doing as a career, it was similar to what I was doing at 45, 50, but I was much further along in my career. And I had opportunities where I could have gone into work that required clearance, government clearance, security clearance. Now, one instance I took it, a couple others I passed on it. But they don't think that, let's say you're me 20 years from now and you've got one of those OF accounts and the FBI is going to do an investigation on you. If you think that's not going to be a problem, you're a fool, right? I had a young kid, smartest young man I've ever met. And I mentored him when he was in high school in IT because I was an IT director, right? I knew he was going to go far, but I never would have thought he got as far as he did. And at like 30 years old, I met with an FBI agent because his name was Andrew, because Andrew was being offered a very lucrative position that required very high clearance. And not that it was any issue for him, but I sit there and when I relate to young men also, it's one of the things I tell them is you don't know at 18, 19, 22 what may come back to haunt you at 30, 40, 50, 60. And you got to think that through. It may be acceptable now in society to have an OF account, because in a lot of places it is. 30 years from now, it could be completely different. And we talk about self-esteem, we talk about all that stuff. And then it happens in relationships as well, right? Is
Mhm.
she's out having a good time, or he is. I was a himbo in the 80s, right? I was a Chad. Your point about not having self respect, I'm guilty of that, right? I went through some horrific stuff as a child and as a teenager. And good, bad, or indifferent, my response to it was to drink like you wouldn't believe. I drank more from 13 to 23 than most people will in their entire life. And I was out having a good time, I'll put it that way, right? At the time, it was self medicating, but I
Yeah.
had no self respect. None. And I'll be the first to admit it. And I look back at those times now, I'm not ashamed of it. It's who I was at the time, but I acknowledge it. And that's the difference.
Hmm.
And no, it's never come back to haunt me. But every relationship, serious relationship I've had to have a conversation with the woman to say someday there may be a knock on the door and somebody goes, "Hi, you're my father," because I didn't use protection. Right, it was all pre-AIDS.
Yeah.
I was a fool, young fool, testosterone flying, but I would have no one to blame but myself.
Hmm.
And that's why I know it's part of what you talk about in the book, and it's why I do what I do. We're trying to educate the younger guys to say, don't make the mistakes you made, I made, our generation did as a whole. And I think this is what makes me sad, Sam. I think in 30, 40 years, we're really going to see the fallout from what's going on now. I think
Oh,
it's going to
yeah.
be, it scares me, especially since I probably won't be around in 30 years. I'm 61 now. God, I hope I am, but it scares me to think where we're going to be with all of that in 2040, 2050.
One of the other things you ask is what what are some of the mistakes that men make
Yeah, I was going to ask, bring that up.
in
Yeah.
relationships and their interactions with modern women, and how can they men best address them? Uh, One of the biggest mistakes that I think men make is wishful thinking and the denial of reality.
Mm-hmm.
This is painful stuff to deal with. If you want, if you want, and it's natural, if you want to have uh, a, a loving long-term relationship with a faithful woman, the one piece of advice that I give to men is give up. You're sorry, guys.
That,
The odds of you finding that are extremely small. I'm not saying there aren't some women out there that are that you can trust that will fulfill that desire, but they are very, very few and far between. And it's you have to really, as I said before, you have to see them under stress over an extended period of time to figure out whether or not this is a potential unicorn, one of those women.
mm-hmm.
And the only way you can do that, open your eyes, open your ears, look at statistics, compare reality and truth to the fantasy and the lies that you've been indoctrinated with since childhood. And if you use good judgment and reasoning and pay close attention, you will see you will see the red flags if they're out there.
Mm-hmm.
And look, everybody, men and women both, everybody's going to have a few what you might call red
We
flags.
all have them. Yeah.
No one is perfect. Nobody bats 1,000. But if the red flags are consistent and small, so you know what they are, and you know what causes them to wave in the breeze, so to speak, you can prepare for them and deal with them. But when you keep seeing bigger ones pop up and newer ones pop up over and over again, and you won't necessarily see them as things are going smoothly. If you're having a pleasant night out, you go to a movie, you go out to eat, and things are going nice, and everybody's having a good time, you won't necessarily see them. But what happens? What happens if the what happens if the waiter spills the water on her nice new blouse? does she go completely crazy and start cursing and screaming, or does she say, "Oh," and the waiter says, "I'm so sorry"? Does she say, "Accidents happen"?
Right.
I don't. Is she forgiving? Is she willing to accept that as an accident or a human mistake? Yeah, that's good. But when you see things, women generally, if they don't get their way, and I talk about this a little later, and you asked a question, and I'll actually jump ahead to it.
No, go ahead. Go right to it.
Uh, let's see. It was something about. Let's see. Elaborate on what you mean by uh, you discuss the
Oh,
malevolence,
yes. I yeah. So
malevolence and
one of the things
treachery.
that was in the book that you were bringing up that I really kind of hit home with me, right, as I was reading the book was that concept of malevolence and treachery within women's psyche, right? It's
Mhm.
it's something I've talked about myself, and a lot of it is overt and deliberate, to be blunt. A lot of it is it's just how they've been trained to be, right? It's societally within families, whatever, they've been taught that this is the way to do things, and that was really resonating with me. And it's something that I think a lot of the younger guys aren't aware of or are blind to, like we keep talking about that. And that's why I wanted to ask you, can you elaborate a little bit more on the
Yeah,
concept, and
and
more importantly, give some specifics as to what it is?
yeah, and the question couldn't be more timely without getting into politics.
Mm-hmm.
The reaction that women have had to the results of the election is absolutely stunning.
I find it hysterical, my friend.
Oh, it is,
I
and
am
I will
like,
watch it.
this is like the most fun
I,
I've had in the last 10
I,
years.
I sit here. I will watch these YouTube videos and laugh
Oh my God.
nonstop. And it's funny. But here's the thing, guys. It's not just funny. I mean, it is funny. But guys, you need to take these women seriously
Hmm.
and take them at their word. This is they are talking about using pew pews to delete men
Hmm.
just for being men. Uh, and the part of the seminar that I've got, and I can't do all of them. I have I have a file in my seminar on it's criminal file.
Hmm.
It's it where I didn't make this stuff up. I actually downloaded news stories over a couple of year period that just covered a couple of years. I downloaded news stories, and I'll just read you the headlines of about uh, five of them or so. There's one. Let's see. 850-pound a night escort mom who broke her newborn baby's skull showed not one jot of remorse. A 300-pound woman pleads guilty to killing her 120-pound boyfriend by sitting on him. A jail nurse who allegedly wanted to marry a convicted murderer has been charged with poisoning her husband. An Ajax, and that's the city, Ajax school teacher accused of sexually assaulting a 10-year-old student. Scorned lawyer, this female lawyer, scorned lawyer jailed after crying that R word
Hmm.
in a sinister plot to destroy lover after discovering he was already married. Uh, I won't name the city, but police chief cleared in sexual assault claim. Sorry if you have to
No,
read
that's
that.
fine. That's fine.
Uh, claim. Accuser may face charges. Mom allegedly drowns twin 10-month-old boys in motel where she'd been given a free stay. Denison woman pleads guilty for making false R claim. Pittsburgh woman charged with killing estranged husband and hiding hiding the body. Uh, these are just a few stories. So uh, again, it would probably have taken me 15 minutes to just read the headlines of all of these stories, let alone read the articles themselves.
Right.
So what's going on? And I think what's going on, and one of the things that I say in the book is, do you remember? Hang on a second, let me grab something.
Hmm.
If I can find it. The you remember me talking about case of Aileen Wuornos?
Yes.
Uh, this, and I won't find the quote. It'll take me a minute to do, but I point out, and this is based on my observations, personal and professional observation and experience. So you read the remarks she made, her parting remarks
Yep.
to the
Yep.
jury. This is like vile, incredibly hateful stuff. This kind of dark malevolence is not unique to anyone else. This bubbles just below the surface, and I would venture to say in most women, perhaps not to that level, but it's there.
Hmm.
And modern the culture has taken off the restraints and is allowing this horrendous contempt to ooze from their pores like toxic waste from a decaying storage drum.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
I mean that's a really good point that you're making there, because it's kind of timely that we're having this discussion right now, because as we're filming this, just within the past couple of days, Susan Smith,
Smith, Smith, yeah,
who
I saw that.
I remember, you and I are both old enough to remember that case 30 odd
Yeah,
years ago. That's the young woman who
she
unalived her two sons
drives her car into a
into a
lake,
lake.
lets them drown, and
Yeah,
then reports that they were kidnapped, I think.
kidnapped, blamed a black man for it,
Yeah.
the whole routine, right? And I remember the news coverage. See, the problem is now the kids today don't know what it was like. But this went on for days, right? There was a nationwide search for this black man, right?
Right.
And it was all over the media. You know, everybody remembers O.J. Simpson. This was on par with that, okay? And she goes to trial, showed no remorse, none, and was convicted and life in prison. And now she's up for parole, right? I actually,
Which they denied.
yeah, but I watched it, not all of
Then
it, right? But they had it up on YouTube, and I'm watching. You know, it was highlights, but it was there, and I'm like, she's got the tears going. She's playing the victim role, chef's kiss. Okay, masterful job on her part. Thank God they didn't buy it. But it speaks to what you're talking about. That is an evil, evil human being. I'm not even going to say woman, just human being. But yet she can manipulate people. And I found out, I didn't know this, and I don't know if you know it. She's been caught twice having relations with COs. She's been trouble all through prison. And I'm like, yet there are women, even now, defending her. How do you go there? And then add to it, because I know you'll know, that Wade Wilson.
who?
Wade Wilson, the killer down in Florida, murdered, horribly
Right, right,
murdered
right. Yeah.
two women,
Mhm.
horribly murdered them. He's got more women chasing him now than Brad Pitt. I mean, it's, and this speaks to exactly what you're talking about with that underlying malevolence, I guess is the way I'll go with it, that just boiling below the surface that comes out. And sometimes when it comes out, it's really bad. But also other times it's not to that level, but it becomes abuse. It
But
becomes,
it's there. Yeah.
yeah,
And,
let me get him in divorce court or whatever. That's always simmering there, and guys aren't aware of it.
and I'm glad you brought up Wayne Wilson.
Oh God, that one blows my
This
mind.
this is, and again, and it makes women angry when you bring this up. And I don't bring it up with them to make them angry. I bring it up to look, I'm not a troll. I don't do this just to try and make women mad. Nothing would make me happier, or few things would make me happier than to see the light come on.
Yes.
And you cannot fix a problem until you acknowledge that the problem actually exists.
Yes.
You can't fix yourself, you can't make yourself better unless you acknowledge the fact that you've got an illness. Women are attracted to bad boys.
Yep.
They are. I can remember one of the first calls that I answered when I was with a training officer at a police department in Central Florida, was domestic a domestic call. Guy apparently beating up or hitting a woman. The woman was screaming, "Ah, stop hitting me," or something. We get there, knock on the door, and this is the early 70s, so this is long before the domestic abuse laws were excessively tightened up. Knocked on the door. Woman comes to the door. She's got a black eye, a fresh black eye. And there's a guy in there. And we talk to her, we get her far enough away from him. So she's got some protection. And what happened? He hit. Okay. And he didn't deny it. He was drunk. They both had a little to drink. And said to her, "Do you have somewhere to go?" No. Well, she had family, I think a sister in the area. "Would you like us to call your sister?" She'll let me, I mean, the sister would let her stay there. Do, do you want to get out of here? No.
Mm.
You gonna stay here? Well, I love him.
Yep.
And I have one of the things, and any police officer in the country can tell you this. This is one of the reasons that it really irritates me that the government has become so deeply immersed in the domestic violence arena. Violence is violence. Assault is assault. But now you're putting a condition on it. Now, if it's domestic, now it's different. No, and I say, no, it's not. If someone is being battered, it's a crime.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is with the domestic violence, I'll say DV, so you don't have to keep going back and chopping this. With the DV laws, most states have a statutory provision that tells the officer, not you have an option, that tells him you will arrest the primary aggressor.
Yep. That's the Duluth model. Yep.
I know police officers. I know several police officers who were fine. Yeah, and one of the other things you have to do a report, and you have to send a copy of the report to the DV clearinghouse.
Yep.
You have to jump through all these. Well, they responded. They didn't see any injury on either party, and the parties had conflicting accounts of the stories. So I can't tell who the primary aggressor is. So they didn't make an arrest, and the only report they did reflected what they did. You had the allegation, no visible injuries to either party, conflicting stories. They got fired. The expectation was, well, you should have arrested the man.
Yep.
Why? And it boggles the mind.
Well, that goes back to the Duluth model. So I've actually, back when I was a peer counselor for male victims of domestic violence, I attended the trainings that the police, the DAs, judges went to, right? That were modeled under the Duluth model. And the primary aggressor, they need to arrest the primary aggressor. Well, who's the primary aggressor? Well, if you can't tell the scenario you're talking about right now, right? Assume it's the larger person. Who's almost always the larger person? The man. Yeah. So no matter what, and this is why I've had countless Leos say to me, they hate domestics more than any other call. One, it's a serious danger risk.
Yeah.
because you may arrest the guy and she loses her mind and goes after the cop, right? But
And that
it
happens.
happens all the time. But setting that aside is they get put in these no-win scenarios where they show up. I've had police officers tell me they knew it was her doing it, but they couldn't
Hmm.
prove it, and they had to arrest him instead. And I'm like, why? Just to what you said. I'll lose my job if I don't, or I'll pay the price in my career. And I've had several say to me that I know walked away. That's the reason I walked away, because I couldn't do that. It depends on the person, and we can all sit here and say, why wouldn't you just quit your job in that scenario? Well, if you've got a family to feed, sometimes you don't have a choice, right? Or
Yeah.
you can go looking, but I Sam, I can't tell you that, and you know this better than I do, having been a law enforcement officer. I can't tell you the number of law enforcement officers, male and female, by the way, who
Hmm.
had that exact scenario happen. And again, it goes to this whole dynamic that we've created, societally, politically, all of that stuff, that puts women on a pedestal and assumes men are bad. And it's
And that
seeped in everywhere.
and what you just said is, I think, one of the major causes for the current situation is there is this assumption, and it's part of the narrative that I mentioned toward the beginning, that men were told with regard to female nature that they are virtuous, kind, caring, and if they do go off the rails, it's because some man pushed them off.
Yep.
Call it, he made them do it. That is one of the things that men were told, that over the years, as I've actually looked at it objectively, that's not the way it actually is. But if you're some poor lad who had that drummed into your head, uh, let me get to one of the things you said. Uh, advice for men, how to protect themselves emotionally and legally in relationships. One of the most critical pieces of advice you would give: never, never, never drop your guard.
Amen.
That doesn't mean don't be nice, don't be kind, be a gentleman. That's fine, but never drop your guard. You always keep in the back of your mind that no matter how seemingly kind or caring she is at that particular moment, you better consider the possibility of one, possibly an ulterior motive or agenda, whether it's financial status or jealousy, or that she just. Here's the question, and it's interesting because this has actually been used as a legal defense in some countries. Uh, a woman who is at that time of month is viewed, I think France views that as kind of clinical insanity.
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah, I don't know if it was France, but
So,
yeah.
which goes back to one of the things I said earlier with regard to employing women in certain fields, high stress environments where there's a lot of pressure on them. Do you want to give a gun to someone and tell them to go and enforce the law, and they show up one day during that time of the month?
But see, the thing is, they would call you and I misogynist for even bringing that up, but yet it's it's a logical
It's
question to ask.
and
If you're going to make that argument, then you got to apply it here. Not
right.
you don't get to pick and
It's
choose.
it's medically acknowledged in the medical community. They acknowledge women have. I don't know how many times I've heard women say, "Oh, it's that time,"
It's the hormones that made me do it.
to
Yeah.
to explain why their
Yep.
behavior is a little bit impatient or crazy or
Which,
whatever.
by the way, my 2 cents is that's a load of crap, okay? Because
Mhm.
women will say, oh, my hormones made me do it. Okay, well, men have hormones. No, they don't. Yes,
Thank
they
you.
do. Okay, there's a little thing called testosterone.
So
There's a whole bunch of
so here's the
just
trade-off, ladies. When you're going through that that time and you're short-tempered and angry and you blow up at your man, you better consider what time of the day it is. Is it when his hormones are spiking? Because if it is, he might he might respond to
He
you in a
might,
really
well, yeah,
violent way.
and I've had this argument with feminists before who said exactly what you're talking about, and I'm like, you do realize that men have a cycle as well? No, they don't. Yeah, they do. It's biologically proven.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to medical school, you know. I mean, as a trainer, I've studied the human body. I know know it as well as those doctors. I just say I don't have a license to fix it, right? But anyone who's done even a modicum of looking into it realizes that one, men indeed have hormones. Two, they have a monthly cycle as well. They have,
Mm-hmm.
you actually pointed out something, daily influence cycles and all that. Testosterone's higher certain part of the day than others. But yet they dismiss all that. But yeah, and then they'll run to it when it benefits them and say, well, I unalived my two babies because it was that time of the month. What? Okay. I've been married. I don't know about you, but I've been married for a very long time to three different women. Okay. I have had women all around me my entire life. Fantastic women. They will say that's the biggest load of crap more than I will. Yes, hormones come into play, but you're still able to rationally think. So when somebody like, whether it's France or whatever country, makes that argument, I would say that you need to fire every female police officer. To
Yep.
your point, no female should be serving in any capacity where she could potentially cause harm. A social worker, right? If you're going to argue that her hormones could make her dangerous, do you really want her going into homes and investigating what happens to children?
Mm-hmm.
What if she loses her mind and goes after the child? The logical, the illogical fallacy of it all is mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
But
And
yet, that's what men are up against right now. Is we have to overcome that as a group, right? Because they assign all those things to us, when in reality, it's them.
men make guys make friends. Find good friends, men with good character who you can spend time around and associate with. Iron sharpens iron.
Amen.
It's, it's stick around those kind of guys. And here's another thing that I've thought of. And as I say, I'm not telling men don't date or don't get married. I'm just warning you of what can potentially happen if you do. And here's another thing to think about. One of the industries that has exploded in the past 30 years has been the marital counseling
Oh God, you talk about in the
industry.
book. I was like, oh,
And why? And so, guys, think about this. Why would you? Why would you want to engage in an activity that was so dangerous that you had an entire industry set up to try to fix the problem that's going to result?
mm-hmm.
It it doesn't make sense. Look, I'm marriage. Let me wax religiously philosophical for a
Okay.
moment. Marriage was instituted by God for a man and woman. Uh, Adam made Eve, or God made Adam and Eve and put them together in the garden in their free fall condition. Once they fell, the, the chains came off and all kinds of bad stuff happened.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so if you're going to enter into it, just keep in mind, and I'm talking about from people who have a sincerely religious background who want to do what they believe to be the right thing and be married. You know, look look at the marriage counseling industry. Why is it that churches, religious institutions are constantly putting on couples seminars to try and improve marriages because they are that dangerous and they are that filled with problems. So keep that in mind. It's you are rolling the dice and the odds are not in your favor if you're a man.
And
And
that's spot on, right? It's, you
I
know,
wish I wish that was not the case, but it is. And as you have said many times, sorry, ladies,
it, it
that's
it
that's the
is.
way it is.
That's the reality, you know. And I talk same thing that I talk about with guys. I'm not anti-marriage. I am married. Okay, I'm not anti getting in relationships, but the mistake that I made previously, so I'm not exempt from it. The mistake that many of my friends, most guys out there in general, make is that we go into it with our blinders on, as we talked about earlier. Have your eyes wide open. Understand that the majority of marriages now end up in divorce. It's at about 55% of first marriages.
Yep.
You know, 75 when you get to second and third marriages. Guys, we need to just go into it. I'm not saying don't do it, just like Sam said. It's if that's what you want to do, do it, but do it with your eyes wide open and understand the risks involved. That's all
And
we're
an abs-
saying.
and an app to me, an absolute an absolute deal breaker for a man if she's not willing to sign a fair and equitable prenup
I've made the same argument.
drawn up by a good, solid family law attorney who knows what can be done and what can't. If she's not willing to sign prenup,
Run.
say say goodbye.
Run. Run, Forrest,
Yeah.
run. And I actually did a whole podcast. You can go look for it. I'll link it. With one of the preeminent attorneys out in LA that does prenups for even for celebrities. And she talked
Mhm.
about the same thing. If and she put it as either party, man or woman, and that's a fair way to put it. If they're not willing to sign a prenup, you shouldn't be getting married. And I said that to guys too. Well, I'll get a prenup from her. Okay, fair enough, but you should also give her one. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. First of all, second of all, it protects both parties. I
Yes.
I truly believe, and again, I may be naive, that if you have one and it's equitable and it goes both ways, it actually helps to protect the marriage and give it some longevity, as opposed to the first time something goes wrong, one or the other, most commonly the woman, let's be honest,
Right.
running away. I mean, marriage has been so devalued at this point in the younger generations, and you know it's starter marriages or I married for money. I hate all that stuff. Marriage has become so devalued. It's almost at the point where I believe it should be done away with. And that's sad. I don't say that with any joy whatsoever. It's because we're meant to be together. We are
Hmm.
meant to be partnered.
Hmm.
That's who we are as a species. It's how the species evolved, and it's how we have to be to move forward. One of the
Hmm.
things that people don't want to talk about, we're running out of time, so I'm going to be quick on it, is that the way things are now, with so much division between men and women, the birth rate has already plummeted. You look at
Hmm.
countries like Korea, South Korea, and Japan, they're in deep doo doo right now because of the birth rate. China's headed there, some of it of their own making. And this has
Hmm.
nothing to do with politics, it has to do with division between men and women. And the United States is gone off the cliff on it. And that's
Yeah.
why I say to people, especially guys, you need to educate yourself. There are good women out there. They're tough to
Hmm.
find, right? But there are out there, and one of the things I think your book can do for guys is to help them have that understanding and open their eyes this big so that they can find the good ones. Because the reason we keep finding the bad ones is we don't we just like you said way back when in the beginning, we go by attraction. And there are a lot of beautiful women out there. Uh,
Oh, there are.
there are
And
many of them, but a lot of them, that beauty is a trap. And
you
there are other women who are maybe not as beautiful, who are absolutely amazing women. And
do you remember a song? You may not remember it because I'm a little older than you. from the 60s. If you want to be happy for the rest of your life, never make a pretty woman your wife.
I
Remember that one?
I don't remember it. I'm trying to.
Look that up.
I'll have
If
to
you
go
want,
look. Yeah, I'll make. Let me make a
yeah,
note real quick because I will go look that up.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so
you'll like it.
so Sam, we're running out of time here. I want one final question I want to get, and then we'll close
Sure.
things down because I think this is really critical, which is the the biggest takeaway I had from the book, and we talked about it briefly in the beginning, and it's kind of interweaved through there, is that you have a frank discussion with men,
Mm.
basically summing it up as this: you have to be accountable to yourself, right? You
Yes.
have to own your thoughts, your words, your actions, whether it's in life in general, but in specifically within relationships. And you talk about that. It's woven throughout the book, and that, to me, that was the biggest takeaway. Can you kind of share some final thoughts so that someone who's going to go read the book and what they should be taking away from the book and first steps that they should make as a
Yeah.
result?
It's, and I would agree, it's important to have self accountability, but it's also important because you don't live in a vacuum. Don't seek, don't seek relationship advice or counseling from women. Find some strong men that you can find of strong character, shared interests, who you can meet with. I have a very small circle of friends. One good friend in particular, who I meet with him several times a week. We have breakfast,
Mm-hmm.
uh, just to bounce things off of each other on a variety of subjects. But you need men who you can trust, whose judgment you trust, who are mature, responsible, good character that you can associate with. And if you start to drift, and make sure they're aware of it. If you see me start to drift, hey, tell me,
Mm-hmm.
grab me by the shirt and say, "Hey, Sam, step back, buddy."
or my
Uh,
or my favorite phrase: "Cut the shit."
yeah,
What are you doing? Cut the shit. That's my phrase.
yeah, that's it. And so be accountable to yourself, be accountable to others. Oh, and here's the other thing that's really important, and I don't want to take you that far over, but and I talk about this in the latter part of the book. Things that how to live your life. Stay away from drugs, stay away from alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
stay away from pornography, stay off of social media as much as you can reasonably do. Read, expand your mind, make yourself wiser, smarter. Because if you allow yourself to be sucked into the social media, the entertainment industry, the television, the movies, it it will poison your mind. It will poison your ability to rationally think. And
And
do you remember the Menendez brothers?
oh God, yeah.
There was another one. Do you remember? Can't remember the young fellow's name. It's a case down in Miami. The attorney was Ellis Rubin, murdered. I think he murdered his parents.
I'm
His
trying
he
to remember. I don't.
the defense he tried to launch was something like the television insanity defense. He
I don't remember.
proposed that this kid was so disturbed by all of this that it affected his mind. Guys, come back to reality. Don't live your life in a fantasy world. I understand gaming might be fun, but go play ball, go throw a ball, shoot pool, shoot some hoops, do something real. Come
Amen. Yeah.
out from the fantasy world and start living life in the real world.
Go hit the gym, as I always say. Go
Yeah,
go pound
hit the
some
gym.
iron. That's what I do 5 times a week, 3 to 5 times a week, depending on the week. It's the one place where I can just go and get my stress out, pound some iron, makes my body better, but more importantly, makes my mind better.
Yes.
And stuff like whatever your exercise, or in my case, that is my drug, right? Exercise is my drug. Um, it enables you to make smart decisions ultimately
Yeah.
for your life. And that's the most
Yeah.
important thing. Sam, this has been amazing. We flew way over the planned time, and I don't care. That's good. Um,
Yeah, I could have gone on for
we
another
could,
4 or 5
we could
hours.
go until 10 o'clock tonight if we wanted
Yeah.
to. The book right here, how can they get it?
Uh, it is available in paperback only. I didn't want to go with the electronic version. It's on Amazon. If you Google the title "Modern Women: A Tutorial for Modern Men," it will. If you Google the title, it will bring up a link. Or if you just go directly to Amazon and type in the title, it will take you to it.
And I'll put a link down below in the show notes
Thank you.
so that people can just go down there, click on it. It'll take them right over to get it. Sam, this has been amazing. And like you said, there's so much more we could talk about. Do you have any social media or ways that people could interact with you or follow you?
No,
You take their own advice.
I'm in the process of trying to put something together.
Oh,
It's a little tricky to do in my position, but yeah, I'm working on putting something together.
all right, good. Well, if you ever do, let me know, and then I can go back and add it to the show notes. Sam,
Okay.
again, thank you for coming on. This has been fantastic.
Thank you for
I
having me.
totally lost track of time. But I'm looking down. I'm like, oh boy, and I don't care. It's all good. Guys, go get this book. Real. And by the way, I would say to women, go get the book too, because you could learn a lot from it yourselves. But guys, there is a wealth of information in there that can make your life better and protect you as much as anything else from some potentially really bad things. One or any final thought, Sam, before we go?
No, I think we've covered. Like I said, we could have gone on a good deal
Oh
longer,
God,
but
yeah.
that covers the important parts.
All right. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Guys, what a great podcast. And thank you to Sam for coming on. Like I said, go get the book. Here it is here. I will put links down below. And the biggest takeaway, as I said just a few minutes ago, that I got out of the book, and I read it pretty, not cover to cover day in one day, but pretty close to it because it was so good. The biggest takeaway I got that I felt personally was, again, it reinforces that we are responsible for our own actions. We need to take accountability for ourselves and improve ourselves, whatever way that might be for you. So, when the best way to do that is to do things like read a book like that. Take the little nuggets out of it that work best for you. And then the most important part of it is implement it afterward. Because you can read it on the paper, but if you don't do anything with the information, you wasted your time. And I will tell you right now, I am going to be taking a couple nuggets out of this book and implementing them myself. On that note, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. Let us know down below in the comments what you thought of the episode. If you have questions, let me know in the comments. I'll reach out to Sam and maybe we'll have him back on to answer them. And we'll close it up on that. We'll see you next time on Men Need to Be Heard.